the way, but just mostly. All right. Wait for the cue, Ernie. All right. Hello, welcome. My name is Erica Charis. I'm the Outreach Librarian here at the Stan Getz Library, and I'm thrilled you could all be here tonight. Just to give you a little context for all the equipment in the room, we've got a couple of cameras going, and I'm speaking to a microphone even though this room is small enough that I probably don't need it. That's because we are live streaming. We are live streaming on YouTube right now. So that the Berkeley alumni, wherever they landed, and Berkeley Valencia campus can all join in the fun. So that's the deal. So later on in the session, there will probably be a chance for you guys to chat about this as well, to throw some questions out there, that sort of thing. When we get to that point, I'm probably going to shove a microphone in your face, just so that everybody out in YouTube land can hear you. So I think that's the point of order. If you have to leave early, make sure you grab the orange sheet when you leave. The orange sheet that everybody has there is a list of library resources, books, and CDs that relate to tonight's talk. So they're either books on the topic of fashion and music, or they are CDs from any one of the numerous people that could possibly show up in tonight's presentation. I think that's all that I have to say, so let me just very briefly introduce Courtney. Courtney is an artist, full-time artist, yay. BFA from Massachusetts College of Art and Design in sculpture. She specifically works in fiber and fabric. And she and I have had some really great discussions. We've actually collaborated together as well, which has been fun. But we got into some amazing discussions about fashion and the restriction of movement, and I basically interrupted her mid-thought and said, you have to come talk about this at Berkeley. So that's why she's here. And I think you're really going to enjoy her presentation. You'll have a chance, like I said, for Q&A at the end, so please stick around if you can. And I think there is some fun interactive style exploration stuff going on too, so your floor.
Off. Oh, well, hold on, I just got really loud. What is sacred and what is profane? It has the power to be excessively emotive without saying anything at all. It can reveal while concealing. It can highlight and reduce. It defines rebellion, revolution, angst, theatricality, where you come from, where you're going, and who you know, right? So in physically using your body as this source of projection, and then also in figuring out like who you are as a musician, I think that you come up against this question of person versus persona, and of your real self versus your stage self. So for the question, are you what you wear, I think that the emphasis should be placed on the what are you, right, rather than the where part. Purely based on like fashion's ability to speak to that more than anything. Okay. So, what is your person, right? What is this idea of your person? I think that your person is this truest artist you know yourself to be, like the rawest, most honest, most innocent, the artist that speaks from deep within your heart. The person is this emphasis on the interior of yourself. But because we don't create and make in this vacuum and in solitude and in isolation, we make to be seen. Either we are seen or like discovered, or we put ourselves purposefully out. We are seen by others as artists. We're also seen by ourselves, right? We act as self-critics, mediators, editors. When we take that step back and we look again, we're actually being seen by ourselves. So that form and that creation that you're looking at, when you take that step back, the performer on the stage that the audience is looking at is the persona, is your persona. Your persona is that person others and your out-of-body critic, editor, mediator all perceive you to be, okay? So I have this like slightly tangential, but definitely still related little story. There is this amazing place up in Maine that I've gone to. It's called the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts. And I've been there twice, and like both times have been absolutely transformative. So at Haystack, there is this clay bed. And to get to the clay bed, you have to like traverse through the woods, and you have to like time it just right. Going at like the perfect low tide, but not when it's like so low that the area is all full of seaweed, right? But not when it's so high that you can actually access this clay bed. And so at this perfect time, like at this golden hour, this bed of like the purest clay is revealed. And it's like straight from Mother Earth. So to get it out, you have to like go over and basically you just start clawing at it. You just start digging it up with like your bare hands, your sticks, and anything like of use around you. You just start going at this earth like no holds barred. And all the while, like you're being drawn into the earth as you are trying to pry it out, right? The whole experience is really quite this big performance. So you take your bags and you have your baskets and you take whatever and you load it up with all of this raw earth, and you take this raw earth back to the studio. You take the earth out of its element and you take it back to the studio where you have your tools and your wheels and all of your items of manufacturing, right? And you take this clay and you go back and you make things with it. So the point of the story is that like our person is that clay and is that performance of like digging up this clay. We go to that place of our purest creativity and we dig up all of these juicy bits, right? We dig up what's mattering most to us. What has like the water left behind, what's been revealed to us. And while we're digging up this earth, we turn into like this boorish animal who's just like clawing at it, right? But then we go back into the studio and we try to make something of this clay, something presentable. And maybe like today is the day, like you just want to throw that clay up on a pedestal and you call it a day, and that's it. And that, you know, in of itself is this amazingly compelling and absolutely valid thing. But then sometimes maybe you want to transform this clay chunk, and maybe you want it to look a little differently than the way it did coming out of the earth, right? And that transformed, manipulated, and constructed piece is like our persona, okay? So sometimes in our output, our persona will reign supreme. We're all about how we look to the audience, right? We revel in the theatricality and our ability to play up the audience. It becomes about the commitment to picking a role and following through and playing it. You're saying, I'm in it for the show. I'm reveling in my ability to perform, and I am a performance, and I am this act, right? You take the full reins of your persona, and the output ends up being more important than the input. And who you are as an artist, or who you want others to think you are, is that transformed, manipulated, constructed self, okay? Sometimes your person takes over completely. You make this decision to just throw that clay up onto the pedestal, and you take that for what it is, right? And so, for example, like John Lennon's song Mother, the repetition of Mama don't go, Daddy come home, and then he descends into these like screams of distress. It's raw, it's emotional, it's intimate, and it's like straight from that clay bed, right? It's about the audience, and it's about and for the maker. Okay, so then instead of either like the person or the persona being on top, we actually find out that who we want to be and who we are trying to be and who we really are is actually this mixture of the two, right? Sometimes this blend is like easily conveyed and easily worked with, but sometimes this position of being both at once is actually the struggle. It's actually difficult, and it's actually kind of confusing. Sometimes we can feel like this gap is created between our person and our persona. And sometimes in that transition between the clay bed and the clay studio, we can feel like something was lost. Maybe we're not being as authentic or as real or as true to ourselves. Okay, so some of my thoughts on like this gap between the person and the persona. So say that you've felt this way, and say that you feel like a different person on stage than you do when you're like digging deep and you're like getting out all of these juicy bits, right? Instead of this being your intended feeling, it's actually quite difficult to handle, okay? So some questions you could ask yourself in this space. What are the ways you've dealt with it in the past? What does this gap look like for you? Is the gap like a moat? Is it this river to be traversed? Is it a tug of war, like two sides constantly at odds with each other? Are my person and persona, are they friends or are they frenemies, mortal enemies, right? Are they these conjoined twins, torn apart but longing to be connected again? Is it like Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel with God and Adam? They're so close to barely touching, but if they did, it would be too fatal, right? So is this gap untenable, or is this where you as an artist find yourself most at home? Okay, so some of my thoughts on it, right? I think that at all and at any point in our making, in our lives as artists, we are both this person and this persona, whether we know it or not. We are both the most innocent of ourselves and also the most manufactured. Our identity, how we've defined ourselves right now, is best understood as lying somewhere between our sense of what we are and our sense of what we might become. Okay, but I think that there is this point when you can find harmony between your person and persona, just kind of as the earth moves around the sun and the moon moves around the earth, like they're all in sync with each other, they're all in different timing, but it all still works. So some ways to go about finding this harmony. Be self-aware. You as a performer, you as an artist are asked to be both this like creator and this critic, this maker and this editor. So I would suggest you just be aware of this. Be aware of this and harness that power, right? I think what unique roles we kind of find ourselves in as artists and what a blessing and a curse. So take what you know, take and know what you've been given and what you've chosen and kind of just like look it in the face and call it for what it is. Okay. Be deliberate. Go down into that clay bed and deliberately draw the clay up and then deliberately make something with that clay, or deliberately don't make something with that clay. There is a value in losing yourself in your work, right? It's like you get sucked up into this cloud and your hands are moving, your like body's moving, your brain's firing away, right? And like I know this feeling, and it's this unique and extraordinary experience. But I think that a seasoned and a mature artist, what they would do is they would emerge from that cloud and edit and add, and then look at what they've done, and if it calls for it to fall back into this piece, right? Go back into the cloud and make more and do more. But always re-emerge and be deliberate with what you keep, what stays, and what gets discarded. Okay. Then there is this is the idea I think that ties everything together. Trust yourself. It's difficult when we are called to be both creator and editor to trust in our intuition, and our hunches, and our innate drive that brought us here in the first place. So I say just try to trust yourself, even in those moments when you've pulled back and you look at this thing in front of you and you're just like, what did I do? What did I make? I say that you have to have yourself so grounded that you can say like, okay, thanks, but no thanks. Let's try it again, right? So I think that identifying and expressing our identity will be something that we will work on our whole lives, okay? Constantly growing, changing, seeing, and seeing again. Okay, so that like concludes my advice as artist section. Now it is going to be about the clothes, which I'm sure everybody, that's what you all are here for, right? Okay, so one way that artists and musicians have tackled this like person and persona dichotomy is by identifying two or more distinct artists and voices within themselves, and then agreeing that all of these voices and artists are equal, they're all powerful, they're all valid, but that they're all very separate, right? Separate so much so that they could never be meshed into one. Okay, and as a way to honor both of these sides, they decide to keep them all separate and then publicly display one or both or whatever as these separate entities. So for creating these separate identities, right, gives you freedom to find value in all forms of expression that drive you, freedom to follow that which inspires you, freedom to become whatever that inspiration needs for it to take shape. You're not held down by this does this fit into like my one stage self idea? You have this chance to let out a wilder, less inhibited performer who's completely controlled by the craft and the art of music. You have a chance to let out a meeker, more innocent, truer to yourself performer. It could give you courage to create something your more vulnerable self couldn't do or couldn't handle. And it could take your career in another direction or give people a different glimpse of you. So this a really simple, really effective, really impressive way to define and differentiate these identities is by dressing them differently, right? So for example, Beyonce and her alter ego, Sasha Fierce. So Sasha made an appearance on Beyonce's third album, I Am Sasha Fierce. First half of the disc featured the real Beyonce, while the second half featured her alter ego, Sasha Fierce. Famous songs like Halo and If I Were a Boy are all done by Beyonce. And then Single Ladies and Ego come from the second half by Sasha Fierce. Beyonce has actually been quoted as saying, "I'm not like her in real life at all. I'm not flirtatious and super confident and fearless like her. What I feel on stage, I don't feel anywhere else. It's an out-of-body experience. I created my stage persona to protect myself so that when I go home, I don't have to think about what it is I do. Sasha isn't me. The people around me know who I really am." Okay, so the real Beyonce, right? Real Beyonce dresses really simply, muted tones, like natural makeup. She's like showing off this softer, sweeter side. Her clothing's like a little less revealing. She chooses these neutral colors, flowing fabrics, basic forms, right? But then, when she morphs into Sasha Fierce, her makeup becomes more dramatic, and her fashion choices are more cutting edge, risque, and theatrical. She chooses outfits that show off her body more. Like she's wearing this armor as a top. In this picture, she's wearing nothing but thigh-high boots and one glove. The patterns in her fabric are louder, like this leather jacket with several layers of the flames on the front. This yellow ribbon and mesh dress. There's more creativity in what is clothing, right? So, for example, this motorcycle part that she's using as a top. Her accessories are chunkier. She has the square studs holding up her leotard, her spiked bracelet, and her infamous metal robot hand glove thing. Another example, David Bowie and all of his alter egos, Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, and the Thin White Duke, right? Here are a couple photos of David Bowie before his years as Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, and Thin White Duke. He's wearing pretty classic, like 60s, late 60s, early 70s fashion. Simple styles, subdued colors, chillin'. So David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust was several years in the making, but 1972 was when Bowie fully embodied Ziggy Stardust and released the Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars album. Ziggy was this alien rock superstar who reaches fame just as Earth is entering its last 5 years of existence. And to put a physical look to this alien rock superstar, David Bowie starts to dress more out of this world. He tended towards more like glam rock styles, brighter colors, glitzier outfits, preferring like the avant-garde over traditional 70s attire. And there were no boundaries between what was women's clothing and what was men's, right? David Bowie has been quoted as saying, "Off stage, I'm a robot. On stage, I achieve emotion. That's probably why I prefer dressing up as Ziggy to being David." So then, a year later, he released his album Aladdin Sane. Aladdin Sane character was a continuation from Ziggy Stardust. Bowie described him as simply Ziggy Stardust Goes to America. This is the iconic cover from his album Aladdin Sane in 1973. The painted lightning bolt was meant to represent the duality of the mind. Then, and then this is an outfit from his Aladdin Sane tour. Then in 1976, Bowie transformed into the Thin White Duke. He's described by Bowie as ice masquerading as fire and a nasty ogre. The Duke dresses more conservatively than his other personas, wearing like three-piece suits and black and whites. This persona came about during a time when Bowie was struggling with severe drug addiction. Yeah. Okay. Next topic. Musician as a performing object. Okay. So some musicians decide to completely hide themselves with what they choose to wear, right? Instead of the musician using clothing as a prop, their bodies actually become the props for the clothing. So what is revealed and what is concealed is dictated by what the clothing allows. The source of music comes not from this recognizable body, but from someone hidden behind this mask or costume. Instead of being confronted with the musician as a human being in control of the music, the audience is actually presented with the musician as this tool, a tool for being used for music. So, questions this like sort of style brings up for me, at least. How much does it matter what the musician looks like? Does the musician need to have a human face for me to get the most out of the music? To what extent is the body of the musician a machine? What does it mean for the body to be used as an instrument? Is having an inhuman body or an inhuman face a successful way of standing out and making you special? And does the performance then become just about the music? Does a musician have an obligation to humanize music? And as a source of sound, can you dehumanize a body? So here are a couple of examples of the musician as a performing object. Daft Punk, rarely, right? They rarely show their faces. Always wearing the helmets. Deadmau5. Buckethead. I've even seen him with KFC buckets sometimes. Gorillaz, they've gone so far as to turn themselves into cartoons. Fever Ray and Melting Face. Slipknot. Youre. And then I have a funny YouTube video, so
ladies and gentlemen, here to perform an all-clucking version of the hit song Ho Hey by the Lumineers, please welcome the Chickeneers.
Very famous band. Like, who doesn't know the Chickeneers, right? Okay, yeah, so like these guys, they've gone so far as to like not even speak English anymore, right? Okay, so niche, right? What is your niche and what goes into creating and finding your niche? So, what is your niche? Um, a niche is a specific or specialized market. It's usually this subsection of a larger market. So, very simply, your niche is this group or community to which you and your music belong, right? Your niche usually starts out pretty small and then grows as people get to know you better, as you get more publicity, and as you get to know yourself better as a musician. So questions you can ask yourself when figuring out or finding your niche. Where do you come from geographically, culturally? How would you describe your music? Are there people or contemporaries around you that have a similar sound? Who has a similar fan base to you? Who do you admire and gain your inspiration from? And then other questions you can ask yourself, are there certain looks or styles that you gravitate towards? Do you have particular style icons? So style and fashion can be used as this nonverbal way to identify and fit into your niche. It can express belonging to a particular group, and then it can also create distance from other groups and communities you don't fit into or you don't want to associate yourself with. It can communicate an identity that matches the theme of your music, right? It can also communicate a specific philosophy about yourself, one that is in alignment with the niche that you're trying to fit into. So, in a lot of niches, there are objects and styles that become what are called totems for the niche and its members. Totems are items, when adapted by particular groups, come to symbolize certain ideas or ideals, almost to the point of taking on these magical qualities, right? So, for example, hip hop in the 80s, specifically looking at hip hop artists born in or living in New York City, significant totem for this niche is bling, okay? Right? Bling is this personal signifier of movement and social status, of obtaining wealth and success, of upward mobility. Slick Rick has a lot of bling. It's a sign of achievement, a sign of movement within space and place. Salt and pepper. It symbolizes moving through poverty, struggle, violence, moving up and finding success, and then obtaining material wealth, right? And having these experiences that were off limits before. Bling is this totem for the ideal of making something of yourself. Especially like popular during this time, I don't know if you noticed, is that twisted, chunky gold chain. Like, everyone's wearing one of those if you're cool. Okay, another example. UK punk fashion in the 70s. So UK punk fashion in the 70s was grungy, it was dark, it was homemade, it was torn up, it was aggressive, reworked, destroyed. There are references like BDSM, like safety pins, rubber, fishnet stockings, leather, studded and spiked jewelry. You had torn jeans, screen-printed T-shirts. It was an act of rebellion. It was fighting against materialism, excess, and the commercialization of style. It was meant to counteract this colorful and flashy nature of disco fashion. It was about the crude attracting the attention, right? It tended towards chaos and disorder as a response to the economic downturn in the UK at the time. And a popular totem for this time was the leather jacket, right? Usually the jacket was modified with like buttons and studs, excessive zippers, patches, painted and torn parts. Couple examples: Sex Pistols, Gale advert, probably just wearing just the leather jacket in this shot. The Clash, all four of them. Only one guy with a leather jacket on in this one. And the vibrators. They're rough, right? Okay. Transition. Okay. Let's talk about why and how do certain pieces become iconic. So when you look back over musical history, there are some styles that really stick out, right? And that will forever be remembered. So why is that? Why are some outfits remembered and then some not? What makes an outfit, an accessory, a style iconic? So, some thoughts on this, right? One, it challenges people either directly or subtly to reconsider accepted thinking and behavior. It could be about the pure and simple visual impact. The outfit draws attention, it exaggerates something, it ridicules something, it hides something, it's captivating, it's disgusting, it's relevant, it's controversial, it's revolting, it's intriguing, it's like beyond beautiful, right? In some way, it has done something so out of the ordinary that we as an audience are drawn to it. We are torn between this enduring affection and objection. It's a look that stirs up like such strong emotion in us that it gets memorialized in our minds and in music history's archives. For example, Lady Gaga's meat dress, right? Yeah. Okay, or number two, in opposition to that though, there's the style or look that displays resistance as a representation of power. Instead of screaming, "Look at me," it's like, it's threatening you not to, right? It's used as a separator between you and me, between the audience and the wearer. It asserts itself as greater than, higher than, separate from. It's about segregation, isolation, and barriers. It's a weapon and a defense. It's resistance to cultural pressures, fan expectations, and status quo. It remains iconic because of just how high the fence built to separate us was. It speaks to this idea of you'll never understand. You don't get this because you're not in on it. You better stay back, and we are not the same. For example, Public Enemy's, their military style. Or number three, it could be about creating this myth, right? And the symbols that represent that myth become iconic. So accessories, styles, particular choices in clothing all go into creating this idealized and exaggerated conception of this particular person. So for example, you have the myth of the angsty punk rocker who like kills and or beats his wife and girlfriend, who eats only like German sausages for a year, who carves gimme effects into their chest with glass. And then who finally decides to commit suicide after this hard and fast life. We looked at earlier one of the iconic looks for the punk rocker, the leather jacket, right? Or the myth of the crazed rock star who like bites heads off of bats, who snorts their dead father's ashes, who's high on any and everything they can get their hands onto, and then who finally succumb to suicide, early death, mental institutions. They're like well-worn jeans, bandanas, again, leather jackets, belts with like huge vanity buckles, button-down shirts that are half open, all symbols of that myth. Or like the up-and-coming contemporary country music star, right, who calls classic country music fans old farts and jackasses, calls himself an accidental racist, who features more rap than twang, who leverages country roots and heritage only as publicity tools because originally they actually hail from Canada. Button-up vests, tailored white button-down long-sleeve shirts, stylish cowboy boots, ball caps, billowy blouses, plaid and flannel, all iconic country music looks, right? So one really good example, mythical musician with his iconic symbol, good old Prince with his princely guitar, right? Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, so instead of like talking about the why and the how, let's talk about the what. What pieces, fashions, and styles, looks become iconic? So I've kind of come up with several categories, but certainly not all-inclusive and really barely just scratching the surface. So accessory as iconic. So accessories can draw attention to certain parts of the body, right? Beyonce and her handpiece, Madonna and her cone bra, Kanye West and his shutter shades. An accessory can become a trademark for a musician. Michael Jackson in his glove, MC Hammer pants, John Lennon and his glasses, Elvis, his jumpsuit. An accessory could be an integral prop in a music video or performance, with his infamous Thriller jacket, Eminem, the white shirt and the baggy jeans that everyone, all the other Slim Shadys wear. Britney Spears and Banana the Snake, right? An accessory can speak something the mouth can't or chooses not to. The accessory can sometimes speak louder than the mouth. So Kurt Cobain's corporate magazines still suck, cover of Rolling Stone. Madonna's boy toy belt, counterbalanced with her white wedding dress. T-Pain's big ass chain, right? Okay. Okay, uniformity as iconic, okay? When all of the musicians of a band are dressed alike, if not exactly the same, it non-verbally speaks all for one and one for all. This unit is unbreakable. We are forced to be reckoned with. In the music world, right, this could give you a lot of power, clout, strength, authority, prestige. It could go a long way in making you memorable. But the downside is that dressing as a unit steals each individual's creativity sometimes. Sometimes, I mean, there can be these veiled hints of individuality through subtle variations through the outfits, but the message still remains the same. This is not an individual anymore. The sum is greater than the parts. So, Beatles in their Sgt. Pepper uniforms, Temptations all dressed exactly the same. Destiny's Child dressed very similarly. Coldplay, they're all dressed pretty much the same in black. Red Hot Chili Peppers, they all have the suspenders. killers. 3 out of 4 are wearing a leather jacket. Both of these guys are wearing patterned shirts and some sort of button-up top, whether it's the vest or the jacket. They're all wearing the white jackets. All wearing jackets. And 2 out of 3 have these patterned shirts. All the same color scheme, almost all wearing the same thing. And the Supremes, who are actually wearing the same thing, right? Okay. Hyperdrama as iconic. So hyperdrama is about judging the spectacle only in terms of like how spectacular it is. So sometimes musicians are trying to be as memorable as possible. Yeah. Grace Jones and Cher. Sometimes they're trying to sound and look as loud as possible to make all parts of their performance memorable. And Elton John. Sometimes they're trying to take on this other persona and Kiss with their super iconic face paint. Sometimes they have this need to beat out all the other competition and prevail over every outfit he, she, others have ever worn, like Nicki Minaj. Rihanna, awesome inflatable. Karen O, love that. Sometimes it's to play into this fantasy or to be fantastical. So Bjork dropping an egg, right, on the red carpet. Katy Perry with a carousel on her skirt. Who doesn't need that? Liberace, right? Big and bold. Okay. So then, polar opposite, we have nudity as iconic, okay? So polar opposite of clothing yourself is not clothing yourself, is of being naked. And in music, being nude can be this very iconic thing. Most of these slides, except for 2, are pretty like PG-13. But when it's not, there are some nipples. I will warn you so you can avert your eyes if need be. It can sometimes communicate vulnerability, realness, emotional rawness. Miley Cyrus. This video, if you have free time, you should watch. Not only does he take off his clothes, he wants to get so raw that he actually takes off his skin. So, it's famous video, right? Alanis Morissette walking through town naked. Sometimes it can reinforce the body as this erotic object. I'm sexy, look at me, and don't you want this? Katy Perry's California Girls. Britney Spears' Womanizer. Erykah Badu. Good old Fiona Apple, right? Sometimes the nudity can be about a sign of power, control, and voyeurism. Like, you're naked, but I'm not. Okay, this is like the nipple warning. Next 2 slides, we'll be showing some nipples. So, Justin Timberlake's, look, you can like barely see them, so not that bad. And then Robin Thicke's video, and Madonna's Girl Gone Wild video. Okay, this is like the end-ish, right? So clearly, I've really only have scratched the surface on this relationship between music and fashion. I think that the ties, they run so deep, and they've been running so deep for so long that it is basically this unending treasure trove of like possible connections, brilliant ideas, and all of these aha moments. Yeah, So I just hope like this either continues or begins the conversation for yourself and others. And now I'm going to do a very short about me section because I'm sure you're like, who the heck is this person that was just talking to me? So, about me. Like Erica said, I graduated from Mass Art in 2011 with a BFA in sculpture. And after leaving art school, I was like really shell-shocked. There was no one there anymore to like make sure I was making. There was no one to critique me. There was like basically no one there to care except for myself. So I decided to hide in an office job, and that sucked out my soul for like a year and a half. But then I got up the courage and I quit, and that was in August. And since then, I have been a full-time artist, and I'm like trying to figure out what that means exactly. But I do have a couple examples of my work. So this piece, I took these two white button-up collared shirts, and I constructed like this big-ass collar to fit around both of them. And so when you put the shirt on, you're forced into this collar, and you're forced to look at this other person. So it's interesting to look at when two people are wearing it, and then, you know, what does it mean when like one person's wearing it? This is a still, where I stuck two pieces of double-sided tape between my thighs, and I just like pulled them apart repeatedly. And then through the magic of editing, I was able to like slow down and speed this up. So I made this thing that was like equally sensual as it is creepy. Yeah. For this piece, I machine knit this like huge, super, super, super long irregular strip that I then wrapped around my body, and I planted little baggies of milk into it, and then I had somebody stand behind me and squeeze these baggies. Videoed that. This is supposed to be like a pseudo wedding dress made of vinyl that's been printed in lace. So I attached pearl buttons to the back of it, increasing in size. As time goes on, it like transforms a little bit. So then I like pulled it up so it's higher on the neck. And then like the weight of the balls just kept twisting the train, so I was like, F that, whatever. That can be its own thing. Yeah. This one, I hand knit a sweater super, super, super poorly. And then I integrated this sweater that I bought at a store. And it was so poorly knit that like the elbows became these like huge pockets. So I just stuffed the pockets, and I don't know if you can tell, but I stuffed the elbow parts and then just tied them to the back. And then, like Erica mentioned, earlier this year we did this 30-30 thing, and the premise was that Erica would write a poem, and I would make something every day for 30 days, and then we'd like converse and agree on the subject of the day. So I have a couple examples from that. Like a piece of vinyl. Yeah. And then that is it. Yeah, the end. I know. Thanks. I know, I should have put in like at the end slide. Maybe another video. Yes, I cannot promise I can answer everything, but I'll talk to you. I'll try.
All right. People have thoughts, questions? Jump in on the conversation. Particular iconic fashion people that she missed that you want to make sure everybody knows about?
Yeah. God, there's so many, right? I just like covered everything, right? And y'all are just totally satisfied.
So
yeah.
Well, when we were having our discussion, I remember talking about how sometimes the fashion choices of musicians can restrict, like, even the choreography that they can do.
Right.
Right. If choreography is a way of communicating as well as the music,
Right.
then the bubble dress of Lady Gaga is going to dictate what choreography is even possible.
Right.
You want to riff on that for a little bit, or?
Yeah. That sort of, that idea of the costume and the fashion controlling the body is what really interests me. I know interests me in my work. So, like, this idea of, I saw this picture of Beyonce in the mermaid dress, and she had to be literally carried up the stairs because she could not walk anywhere. Like, yeah, it's just interesting to think about. Beyonce has made this decision to put that onto her body, but then at what point does she lose decision anymore? She doesn't have the decision to walk on her own, right? She has to have these people carry her up. And then, yeah, like Lady Gaga at the piano in the bubble dress, like, so then what does that become about? Is she just about the performance? I care about the way I look, not how I move, you know? Or is the non-movement part of the show, you know? I think, yeah, it's like so many layers, you know, so much to think about. I don't know. I could stay up all night thinking about that sort of stuff.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so this is, I guess, not directly related to fashion, but something I was thinking about while you were talking, which was, I guess I'm just curious to know about your opinion on how much physical attractiveness plays a role in an artist's popularity.
So what comes to mind is like Barbara Streisand, right? Didn't they tell her she needed to get like a nose job and like totally change the look of her face to become famous? And I know they told like Leah Michelle from Glee or whatever, she also needed to get a nose job. But then they didn't, right? And now look at them. They are like so famous. They, yeah, they have such talent. I think that talent overrides looks. And like, okay, like, let's be honest. Like, say you're like really, really, really busted, right? You can dress or like to top your looks. Like, that's my personal opinions. You can dress like so insane that people are like, what do you have on your body? Not what is that face, you know? I don't, yeah, like, you can really harness that power of fashion and use that to be like, yeah. You can play up your own. Yeah, and that is awesome. You know, that's really, yeah, this interesting thing too.
I wish there was a student here who had to leave, and I wish she had been able to stay because her brain was so in this territory. She had a photo shoot this weekend.
Oh, cool.
And so she was trying to make some fashion choices based on where she was going. I wish she was here to throw a question in because I'm sure she would have one. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on how this has changed from the radio age to the video age in music?
Oh, God. That is like a very heady topic. So, yeah, so really surface level, right? It becomes more about how you look and the importance of the way you dress and how you look rather than how you sound. So then I think like maybe that's how certain artists and certain musicians have become famous. Maybe they wouldn't have been famous back in the age of radio when it was about your voice and about your talent, but that they've made something of themselves by the way they've dressed. Yeah. And then that just really speaks to how powerful fashion is, right? Yeah, I haven't really thought about that very much because I'm very, I'm how old? I live in the age of the visuals. I am a visual person. Yeah. I'll think about that, though. I mean, like, what do you guys, like, since we're, like, a pretty small group, like, how do you decide? I'm interested in how do you decide what to put on today? Like, how did you, like, choose that scarf? How did you, like, how do you decide this is why I'm wearing at home, this is why I'm wearing when I'm going out on stage? Like, for the artists, musicians out there. Right.
When we were covering the sort of Western stuff, we all had to wear black cowboy hats, and people in the audience actually mistook us for cowboys, even though we were all from New Jersey. And what started me really wearing something a little bit outlandish was the time that during a break I was at the bar and somebody thought I was a waiter.
Ooh.
I said, next time I'm going to wear something a little different so they'll know at least know I'm in the band,
Yeah.
But at this point, I'm thinking about how the fashion choices that you make may influence people into expecting you to sound like something, or expecting you to play a certain way, and it may even influence feedback into the music. Because if you're playing with people in a kind of an ensemble where individual contributions are valued and you're not just playing notes off a piece of paper, they may say, oh look, he's dressed like that, he's going to play like this, and they're trying maybe to suit you because
Yeah.
of the way you're dressed. I wonder if you have any comment on how the fashion actually feeds right back into the notes,
Into
into the music itself, and actually feeds back and could affect or prescribe what you're supposed to be playing.
So I think that goes back to this idea of your niche, right? And like certain music styles do have certain looks to it, right? You said that you were like wearing a country, like a cowboy hat, right? So then I'm going to think that you are going to play country music, right? And is that what?
If you don't, it's a little weird, right? It kind of will throw people off.
Yeah. I think like that those sort of ideas are propelled by certain things becoming iconic, like Garth Brooks. He wears like a cowboy hat. He plays country music, Yeah, I think that like it's kind of like this drop of water, and the idea like country music and cowboy hats, it just like perpetuate like affects kind of the genre. And obviously I have not thought about that. I think that it's cyclical though. Your music feeds into your fashion, when your fashion will feed into your music. So it's difficult to put an end to like, well, where does one start and one, end? Does that make sense? Okay, well, it's barely making sense to me. So
It does make sense to me, and actually the thing that I was just thinking about kind of related to that is the use of fashion when an artist wants to sort of change their image or their sound. Madonna changing her sound through her image, or you brought up Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus is a great example of leveraging fashion to kill off an alter ego.
That's right. Yeah. Gosh, Miley Cyrus. Could do a whole talk on her, right?
Okay, my question is about like body weight, like how you think the body weight changes with personas and stuff. So, yeah, don't know exactly how to ask it.
Is body weight a part of
Yeah, so I read this, Beth Ditto, right, from Gossip. She is like, larger, right? And she said that she could not find clothes that fit her, or like her publicist didn't want to put her in clothes that made her look good. So what did she do? She started making her own damn clothes. She was like, I know what my body looks good in, and I'm just going to start doing it for myself. And then, and look at her. She's like so famous, and she's iconic, right, for a lot of people, and it like really breaking through. So I don't, I don't think body, you just know yourself physically and dress yourself for what you want to show off, or how your body is. Yeah.
Yeah, and two, I was just gonna say, like I don't know if you guys know I think the like Hawaiian singer. He
Okay.
did, like, I mean, he was like 700 pounds by the time he died or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
but that's interesting because I don't think it necessarily boils down to like, just trying to look better or like worse. It's sort of like for him. Oh, sorry. For him, the weight added to his image in a way that made him seem a little bit more, I don't know, jolly or sort of innocent and happy. And it's like someone like him probably would have more trouble pulling off like sexy.
Yeah.
But like they can use their natural disposition to appeal to different emotions.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be good looking, bad looking. It's just like this person seems much more, I don't know, I guess innocent and vulnerable and that sort of thing. Yeah.
I think you can just use the power of your face, right? You can like wink and like make kissy faces, and like that could be sexy, and you could be 700 pounds. I don't know. Like the abilities of all different parts of your body, not just.
Have you guys seen the She Keeps Me Warm video with Mary Lambert? Mary Lambert is the one that wrote the hook for Same Love. She has a song, She Keeps Me Warm, that actually I think the song came from the hook. People were asking for the song that the hook came from, and she wrote a song to contain the hook. But she's somebody who is bigger, and I think in her video she actually does pull off, it's sort of a sweet sexy. Again, it goes back to that like jolly, innocent sort of thing. Like there's something to that. But she does somehow pull it off, I think.
Yeah.
And I think Adele goes there too.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's interesting. But I think the bigger women sometimes project the like power thing too. I don't know what that is, like
I
woman
don't
in charge sort of thing too.
Yeah, you have to think about that. That's deep.
Hi. I was wondering what your opinion on like cultural appropriation was with regards to this, because there's obviously been a lot of artists who have either used clothes from their own culture or from other cultures to change how they're perceived, and
Right.
how you thought this might have changed or like developed.
Like how you can do it for yourself, or
Well, how like some artists will use like a token or like a style of dress that's associated with a culture or like a group within a culture, and how people, that either that they feel they belong to or that they don't at all, and people sort of react to this.
yeah. So my thoughts on that. So I think that has to go back to like the niche, and there are these like totems, that belong to a certain niche, and then when somebody, I would have to think about like why is the musician using that? Is it a prop? Is it a way to fit into this niche, like break in that they weren't in before? Is it a source of ridicule? Like I don't know. What? So that is a whole hot mess, girlfriend. Like, oh my gosh, the black women dressed up like bears that she rubs up against, like that is twerks up against, whatever. I don't. So from what I've read about that situation is that the way Miley Cyrus did it was this like dirty, like sexual, this like thing, but then but it's not really that. It's just this. It's just a stance move, you know. And I think that's a case of like somebody taking something that they cannot handle and then using it, and they've abused it, you know. Yeah.
There's a power dynamic there too, right?
Yeah.
Depends on, so you have somebody from a cultural majority stealing from a cultural minority,
Yeah.
and that is a certain type of thing that has a certain type of explosiveness to it, whereas it's a different thing if it's in the reverse, right? Although that can have blowback too.
Yeah.
That can
Right.
have, it was interesting, I was just reading an article about people in certain poverty levels buying luxury goods and getting blowback off of that, but in fact the wearing of pearl earrings to an interview increases your likelihood that you'll actually land that job, and so you end up spending money on these earrings that you can't really afford in order to get to the place where you can afford those sort of things. Because you're sending a message. You're sending the message that I'm the type of person that would be good for this job. But so stealing from a culture sort of above you in the power structure has a certain blowback too of social climber or that sort of thing. So I think there's a power dynamic in play there too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there's that desire for people to appear like they're holding on to their roots. So if you look at Macklemore, he's like now obviously very rich,
Yeah.
and is still kind of trying to dress like he's just one of us.
Yeah, like the thrift shop, right?
Yeah.
He goes to the thrift shop, you know. I don't know.
Well, it's very clear that fashion and music go hand in hand, as what we've been talking about. But I just want to know, when does it go too far as when it's becoming more about the clothes instead of the art? Because I remember there was a time when Kanye West was more into his collaboration with Louis Vuitton, and he spent less time on his art. And even with the Grammys, I believe last year there was dress code restrictions.
Yeah.
And I started to think, is this becoming more about the clothes that we're wearing and less about what we're actually putting out in the studio, on stage, wherever?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you have to like bring in branding, right? So Burberry has this Burberry acoustic, right, where they dress these different bands in Burberry jackets, and that's how they play. So how has Burberry taken their sound but told them they have a dress code and you are wearing our jackets? You know, like, yeah, when does it become about Burberry has branded you, or I've put my music on their website, you know? It's a very, I think, shady relationships. I don't know.
I have a question. Is there any performer in the music industry today who you admire for their fashion choices?
This is going to totally sound so cliche, but I love Lady Gaga. I think that she's insane and amazing, and like she's like her applause video that's coming out, her whole art pop look, you know, going back like referencing like music decades ago, you know, I just constantly changing. Her on the VMAs, did you see with like the seashell and the, like, I thought maybe that was not so tasteful, but I really like her, yeah. Probably losers, but.
What do you think makes it acceptable for Beyonce, for example, to wear the bodysuit and be sexy but still not vulgar, and for example, Miley Cyrus to wear it and be completely, or I don't know, even Britney Spears to look like, you know, vulgar?
So like how to wear a bodysuit and not be vulgar.
Just because every time I look at Beyonce, I didn't look at her as vulgar.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think in Beyonce's instance, like that's about her always. Like I've always thought her of as classy, right? She's always putting herself out as classy. So it's about your history. Um, Personally, I thought Britney's like toxic video with the sequined, like the bejeweled bodysuit. I thought that was kind of classy, not too vulgar. I mean, maybe some of her like dance moves were a little vulgar, but like the outfit was pretty bling in, literally, you know. So um, I think like with like Miley's, you know, the latex, like material matters, right? Um, if you are in latex or rubber or whatever, like that adds this level of vulgarity, right? But yeah, I think if it's like classy, it, you know, yeah, and how you move your body in it matters.
We probably have time for one more question if somebody wants to throw, or a thought. Somebody wants to throw something
Yeah.
out there.
Love thoughts. Love to hear.
Okay, so since we've been talking about Miley a lot, I'm gonna add another thing about Miley. Um, her outfit from the VMAs was actually like the #1 Halloween costume sold,
Yeah.
with the foam finger and everything. So, I wanted your like opinion on how it affects like teenagers and like parents, because I know some babies had it on too.
Oh, what? I didn't know that. So I think like that performance was Miley trying to come out as an adult, as this sexual being, trying to break away from her like Hannah Montana look. Um, she just got through a breakup, right? And she went to that like hyper drama extreme where she was um, with the tongue, and then the mirroring of the tongue with the bears and the big bears on stage, and then she takes that off and she just has like the latex nude bikini outfit. Yeah, I think that that has become iconic because of how like way over to the boundaries it was, and people may not understand completely this it pushing on that boundaries. They think maybe it's this funny thing. Bears are cute sometimes. Sticking out your tongue can be cute sometimes, you know. But I think it's a case of misunderstanding and not like fully going down to the depths of why she's done this, why she wore that, you know. Does that make sense to people? Okay. Yeah, if people are down with it, yeah.
So I think at this point we are going to leave off our YouTube folks. So thank you for joining us. Goodbye. Because we're going to do an activity in here for those of you that want to stick around in constructing your own
And is that performance of like digging up this clay. We go to that place of our purest creativity and we dig up all of these juicy bits, right? We dig up what's mattering most to us. What has like the water left behind, what's been revealed to us. And while we're digging up this earth, we turn into like this boorish animal who's just like clawing at it, right? But then we go back into the studio and we try to make something of this clay, something presentable. And maybe like today is the day, like you just want to throw that clay up on a pedestal and you call it a day, and that's it. And that, you know, in of itself is this amazingly compelling and absolutely valid thing. But then sometimes maybe you want to transform this clay chunk and maybe you want it to look a little differently than the way it did coming out of the earth, right? And that transformed, manipulated, and constructed piece is like our persona, okay? So sometimes in our output, our persona will reign supreme. We're all about how we look to the audience, right? We revel in the theatricality and our ability to play up the audience. It becomes about the commitment to picking a role and following through and playing it. You're saying, I'm in it for the show. I'm reveling in my ability to perform, and I am a performance, and I am this act, right? You take the full reins of your persona, and the output ends up being more important than the input. And who you are as an artist, or who you want others to think you are, is that transformed, manipulated, constructed self, okay? Sometimes editor, mediator, I'll perceive you to be, okay? So I have this like slightly tangential, like, but definitely still related little story. There is this amazing place up in Maine that I've gone to. It's called the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts. And I've been there twice, and like both times have been absolutely transformative. So at Haystack, there is this clay bed. And to get to the clay bed, you have to like traverse through the woods and you have to like time it just right. Going at like the perfect low tide, but not when it's like so low that the area is all full of seaweed, right? But not when it's so high that you can actually access this clay bed. And so at this perfect time, like at this golden hour, this bed of like the purest clay is revealed. And it's like straight from Mother Earth. So to get it out, you have to like go over and basically you just start clawing at it. You just start digging it up with like your bare hands, your sticks, and anything like of use around you. You just start going at this earth like no holds barred. And all the while, like you're being drawn into the earth as you are trying to pry it out, right? The whole experience is really quite this big performance. So you take your bags and you have your baskets and you take whatever and you load it up with all of this raw earth and you take this raw earth back to the studio. You take the earth out of its element and you take it back to the studio where you have your tools and your wheels and all of your items of manufacturing, right? And you take this clay and you go back and you make things with it. So the point of the story is that like our person is that clay.
Thought and said, you have to come talk about this at Berkeley. So that's why she's here. And I think you're really going to enjoy her presentation. You'll have a chance, like I said, for Q&A at the end, so please stick around if you can. And I think there is some fun interactive style exploration stuff going on too. So, your floor.
Oh, well, hold on, I just got really loud. What is sacred and what is profane? It has the power to be excessively emotive without saying anything at all. It can reveal while concealing. It can highlight and reduce. It defines rebellion, revolution, angst, theatricality, where you come from, where you're going, and who you know, right? So, in physically using your body as
Not all the way, but just mostly. All right. Wait for the cue, Ernie. All right. Hello, welcome. My name is Erica Charis. I'm the outreach librarian here at the Stan Getz Library, and I'm thrilled you could all be here tonight. Just to give you a little context for all the equipment in the room, we've got a couple of cameras going, and I'm speaking to a microphone even though this room is small enough that I probably don't need it. That's because we are live streaming. We are live streaming on YouTube right now. So that the Berkeley alumni, wherever they landed, and Berkeley Valencia campus can all join in the fun. So that's the deal. So later on in the session, there will probably be a chance for you guys to chat about this as well, to throw some questions out there, that sort of thing. When we get to that point, I'm probably going to shove a microphone in your face, just so that everybody out in YouTube land can hear you. So I think that's the point of order. If you have to leave early, make sure you grab the orange sheet when you leave. The orange sheet that everybody has there is a list of library resources, books, and CDs that relate to tonight's talk. So they're either books on the topic of fashion and music, or they are CDs from any one of the numerous people that could possibly show up in tonight's presentation. I think that's all that I have to say, so let me just very briefly introduce Courtney. Courtney is an artist, full-time artist, yay. BFA from Massachusetts College of Art and Design and Sculpture. She specifically works in fiber and fabric. And she and I have had some really great discussions. We've actually collaborated together as well, which has been fun. But we got into some amazing discussions about fashion and the restriction of movement, and I basically interrupted her mid-
as this source of projection. And then also in figuring out like who you are as a musician, I think that you come up against this question of person versus persona, and of your real self versus your stage self. So for the question, are you what you wear, I think that the emphasis should be placed on the what are you, right, rather than the where part. Purely based on like fashion's ability to speak to that more than anything. Okay. So what is your person, right? What is this idea of your person? I think that your person is this this truest artist you know yourself to be, like the rawest, most honest, most innocent, the artist that speaks from deep within your heart. The person is this emphasis on the interior of yourself. But because we don't create and make in this vacuum and in solitude and in isolation, we make to be seen. Either we are seen or like discovered, or we put ourselves purposefully out. We are seen by others as artists. We're also seen by ourselves, right? We act as self-critics, mediators, editors. When we take that step back and we look again, we're actually being seen by ourselves. So that form and that creation that you're looking at, when you take that step back, The performer on the stage that the audience is looking at is the persona, is your persona. Your persona is that person others and your out-of-body critic